Welcome to What Resonates. This podcast is about tuning into energy, intuition, and what feels true for you. Each conversation invites you to notice what sparks curiosity and feels aligned, opening a wider field of possibility for yourself and for humanity. Keep tuning in and follow what resonates. Do you feel a call to open more fully to your inner guidance and live in alignment with your highest wisdom? I have a course and it's called Channel Your Divine Self. It's 6 weeks. We're meeting live starting January of 2026. And I'm leading the class along with the emissaries of light. And together, we're going to help you release doubt, anchor trust, and build a safe, sovereign connection with your divine self. Every session is recorded and you'll receive lifetime access so you can return to the teachings over and over. If you're ready to channel with clarity, visit mainstreamreiki.com and join us. Welcome to What Resonates, the podcast where we invite you to tune into yourself as you tune into our conversations, in which we explore things like spirituality, consciousness, intuition, energy, and healing. Today, I have Rosemary Thornton as my special guest. She's the author of Remembering the Light, How Dying Saved My Life. 7 years ago, Rosemary was diagnosed with stage 2 cancer. During what was meant to be a minor procedure, she bled to death and was without a pulse for more than 10 minutes. When she returned, the cancer was gone. Her extraordinary experience not only healed her body, but opened a profound awareness of love, purpose, and divine guidance. Today, we're exploring what life is like after death, how our intuition, relationships, and daily connection with the unseen world have changed and continue to evolve. If you'd like to hear Rosemary's full near-death experience in detail, you can find that story in our Season 4, episode number 26, called Into Death and Back Again. Today, we're here picking up where we left off. And for those who may be new to your story, Rosemary, I would love for you to perhaps share a short version of what happened that day and what you remember most vividly from your experience. And I have to say, too, first, well, welcome. I'm so glad that you're back.
Thank you very much. It was 2018 that I was having a medical procedure done, and they made an oopsie and sent me to my reward. It was a surprise for everybody involved, especially me. It was a minor medical procedure to figure out how far the cancer had spread, and I was anesthetized for 30 minutes. And it's interesting, I told them as I went under, I said, I am hypersensitive to drugs of every kind. Be gentle, with the stuff. They said it took 3 hours to wake me up. They were at the point of becoming concerned, but it was after that they sent me home, even though I was bleeding profusely. Got home, things got worse. An ambulance was summoned. They took me to a small ER near my home, and that's where it went downhill quickly. And I knew I was bleeding to death. It's a scary thing to see that happening and knowing what's unfolding. But I remember being on the gurney in that little cubicle in an ER, and I grabbed the nurse's hand that was at the side of the gurney, and I said, "Promise me you're not going to let me die." And she held on to my hand, and with the greatest tenderness and genuine maternal affection, she said, "Oh, honey, we're not going to let you die. We have many solutions for this." And they gave me a powerful drug, a morphine derivative, because they thought I was in pain. I actually wasn't. And once that hit the heart, my heart went, "Ah, what have you done?" And I suspect that's when my heart stopped. I've always believed, I've had, I guess, a knowing that the soul often leaves the body before the body is done with the countdown. And I have 2 examples of that I know of. I remember reading an article many years ago, probably 30 years ago, about a man who walked into his beautiful home and had a fairly spacious entry foyer. He didn't realize hiding behind the door was a crazy guy. And the guy lunged at this fellow who just walked into his home and stabbed him repeatedly in the chest. And he said as that knife came up, he was in the corner of the room in spirit. And he was watching these two men struggle greatly and watching the bad guy prevail and saw him fall to the ground. I mean, saw himself fall to the ground. And he knew that his life was over. Well, apparently somebody'd seen the struggle, ran into the house. He was resuscitated. And the reason the story made the papers was he went around lecturing to families of violent crime. And he said, what it looks like happened to your loved one may not be what happened. Their suffering may have been minimal. And I always loved that story. And then I had a friend whose 14-year-old daughter died after prolonged illness, and she was at her daughter's bedside for a lot of time. But one night this was her only child, a child she had wanted her whole life. The child came to her late in life. She was in 39 when this little girl was born. And she was just begging God, show me I can get through this. Show me this isn't going to kill me because I don't think I can survive watching my little girl die. And she said she saw Jesus appear at the foot of the bed. And Jesus just went. And she saw her little girl's soul, just an ethereal sense of soul, rise up, and Jesus embraced her. And then they disappeared. And she said, I knew that's when she was gone. And as the world measures things, it was actually about 3 days before the body stopped. So I believe that was my case as well, because I was lying on that bed and I lost consciousness after they gave me that powerful drug. And I don't really remember what happened in the room, but I remember being catapulted out of that body. I use the word catapulted because it really did feel like that. It was a very strong, just a tremendous arcing through the air. And through the air, I mean into this blackness in which I was ensconced. And it was a very velvety, comforting, peace creating blackness. But my friend who had been at my bedside, he said that he saw my blood pressure going down, which is indicative of somebody who's bleeding to death. And he said, you tried to sit up on the gurney. And he said, your hands came up. And he said, you reached up almost like a little child reaching for a parent to pick them up. And he said, and then you just collapsed. Everything went back down and your eyes shut and your head moved a little bit. He said, but your blood pressure continued on for maybe a minute or two. So I do believe that the soul leaves the body before the body is done. And that's important to me because we hear so many stories of people having bad ends, you know? And this may seem like a curious thing to add, but you know, the World Trade Center, so many people lost their lives in such horrific ways. And I need to believe that that was a merciful end for them, even though it didn't look like that to us. So I take comfort in that because being an empathic soul, I I just took in one stray cat and I'm getting ready to take in another because I look at that cat outside and I'm like, oh my gosh, you poor thing. So yeah, I'm it's hard to be in this world when you're too sensitive. It's very hard. So I do believe that in my case, I passed on before the body's signs or vital signs or what, isn't it? The word vital means life. You know that
Mm-hmm.
the life signs were gone. And my experience was phenomenal. I mean, I went through this blackness. I felt the presence of what I call, I guess, God. I mean, the presence said to me, I felt this massive presence in this blackness, and I looked up, and you know, I'm having a great time. And I said, "And who are you?" And before I could even finish, the answer was, "You are the image and likeness. I'm the original." And you talk about things that have stayed with you. There's hardly a day of my life in these subsequent 7 years I don't think about that. And there was gosh, I can't tell you how many times I feel sick or depressed or something going right or the day isn't going well. And I was actually looking at a bottle of cranberry juice and it said the original. And it just seems like there's these little signs everywhere because the original is a high compliment. So when I think about that I'm the image and likeness and there is an original, that's immensely comforting. So yeah, a lot of things of that experience have stayed with me. And I had a father ask me, his son had died at home. His son was in his 30s and had died at home from a lengthy disease. And he was actually from a religious belief system that believed that how you died is how you woke up. So if you died missing a leg, you woke up missing a leg. Or if you died sick, you woke up sick. And this is a very archaic belief system. And he asked me, how long did it take for my son to be healed in heaven? And I said, well, in my case, I was in this white room and I went from where I started in the white room, not even remembering how I got there, to I saw a door in front of me, and the door was maybe 15 feet in front of me. I said, so if there is a purgatory or a cleansing process or an intervening time between earth and heaven, in my case, it took me less than 15 seconds to get from where I was to that door, at which point, things went awry. I didn't make it to heaven. Ugh! Uh, but I told him, I said, if it is true that we die with these things and we have to work them out, I said, then it took him probably 10 to 15 seconds. And frankly, I don't think there's even that. In my case, I didn't feel sick or diseased or troubled. I just was like, I made it. I'm here. This is great. But if there is a purgatory, and I don't believe there is, and there may be like a place where we go to get interviewed and the exit interview and how'd that life go and what'd you learn and did you show love and oh, you made a little boo boo there. People call it the life review, but what if it's just really an exit interview, where we kind of do a quickie review of what went right and what went wrong? But if that is the case, my time in the white room was very short. It felt short to me. But then again, what is time? How many times does the earth go around the sun? And if that's time, there is no time in heaven. And Einstein said there is no time. Well, actually, Einstein said, to those of us who are committed physicists, the past, present, and future are only illusion, however persistent, which is the same as there is no time. I mean, we think that time is very linear. The past happened this morning, the present is now, and the future is tonight. But Einstein was saying it all kind of wraps around itself. So if you're in heaven and having a great time, how can you say, well, that was about 5 minutes? I don't know. It's so ethereal, really.
It is.
But I guess that's a brief review. I came back. I got turned away from heaven. As my friend Dale says, he said, you're the only person I know who got evicted from heaven. But it was kind of suggested it might be a good idea to go back, which I was very hesitant to do. And what turned me back was these spiritual beings who had been accompanying me showed me that nurse who had promised me she wasn't going to let me die. And at first, I was a silent observer in the room in which she was in. And this was a potential future. This was not a concurrent happening. But in this potential future, she's sitting on a little metal stool. And I see all the linens and medical supplies around her. And she's leaning forward, head in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. And she says through tears, I promised that woman I wasn't going to let her die, and I lost her. I was like, well, she's about my age. She's retiring soon. She's lost a lot of people. I want to get out of here. Let me out. Let me out. Let me out. But then I was shown how she felt about this loss. And it was truly in the center of my core, I guess your solar plexus or whatever one may define that. And I felt her guilt and sadness and regret and self disappointment and all those negative, dark things. And I recognized that from the consequences of my own husband's death. He ended his life at our home. And I realized if I could spare one person all that self-condemnation and regret and sadness and despair, I had to go back. And that's how you hook an empath and get it back.
That's the magic pill,
And
huh?
so it was. And when I came back, it took some time but it was affirmed that there was no cancer, literally not one cell of cancer present in any places where there had been a problem. It was a gynecological cancer, and so I had a second surgical biopsy from another doctor, and she was quite thorough. And she actually woke me up when I was in the recovery room because you're still like, oh, where am I? What just happened? And she shook me awake and she said, you are right. There is nothing there. And she told my buddy waiting out in the hospital waiting room, she said, were it not for all the tests and the diagnostics and the physical exam, she said, I wouldn't believe she ever had cancer because her flesh is so pink and pretty and perfect. So I know we have a lot of naysayers in the world who say, well, you never had it. It was a misdiagnosis. I had 2 doctors and a nurse practitioner visually see it and lots of tests. So there's no doubt that there was, and plus what sent me to the doctor was classic symptoms. So there was no doubt in my mind. But it's funny, the cynics will always find a reason to say, oh, that's not what, brain's shutting down. It's all those synapses firing off, all those neural pathways shutting down. But when I tell them about the cancer, then they say, well, that's just, you never had cancer. I mean, it's like the simplest solution, right? Occam's razor, the simplest solution is usually the right solution. Well, maybe I had this thing and then I really died and I went to heaven and when I came back it was gone. Maybe that's really what happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
You
don't
know,
understand why people get all wound up trying to explain something.
Rosemary, how do you feel when people are skeptical and they're trying to make up, different explanations? Does it anger you? Does it disappoint you? How do you feel about it?
I had to kind of grow into an awareness, into I guess into the spiritual wisdom of realizing that there are people who just are not going to listen. And Jesus talked about cast not your pearls before swine, but people don't talk about what comes after that, lest they turn and rend you, which is attack you, rip you to bits.
Hmm.
So I have become more thoughtful about with whom I share the story. And if somebody says that's just your brain shutting down, or it goes into all the machinations of explaining why it never happened, I usually say something like, well, you're wrong, but that's okay, and you're in for a surprise. And I leave it there.
And when you came back, Rosemary, what would you say being back in your body? Was it foreign? Was it different just being in your body from before?
Hmm.
What was there some sort of contrast or did you just feel like yourself again?
Boy, that's a good question. I really feel that I came back as Rosemary V27. I got a serious upgrade. I really did. And it did feel very foreign. And in fact, that I am so grateful you said that because the last few weeks I've been doing a lot more praying than usual, which causes you to grow a bit spiritually when you have to focus hard on something. And I have really been struggling with being back in this body. I mean, really struggling. I'm 66 years old. And gosh, 2 weeks after my birthday, I was going out on my bike ride. I took a tumble, broke my little arm in 3 places. It's not healing as fast as it should. And I am doing the work. I mean, the doctor looks at it, got a second opinion and all that. But my goodness, it's frustrating because it hurts and it's a little misshapen. And they tell me it might take months and months to heal because of the nature of the break. And I have had such good success with healing. And now this thing has been not only slow, but some problems. So it is heavy. It is hard to be on this earth. It's hard to be in this body. It's hard to be walking out amongst the English. I mean, it really is. It's just hard. And right before we came on here, I was brushing my teeth and looking at them, and I see I need a little dental work on one tooth. And I'm like, gosh, can I trade this in for a newer model? One that doesn't have these issues? I don't know. I pray every day that we are all ageless and immortal. We really weren't born into this and we're not going to die out of it. We're on a continuum. And this is not just temporary, but it is very it's not as strong or substantial as you think. An atom is 99.97% empty space. So what is this stuff that we call matter? And I have thought about the fact that when I went to heaven, I was on that my body was on that gurney and I'm off having adventures in heaven and I'm told lots and lots of wonderful things, powerful, life-changing things. And they say if you agree to go back, you'll be restored to wholeness. And they didn't say you'll be healed of this particular problem, but they said restored to wholeness. And I was. And not just about the physical ailment, but about the mental agony of having lost my husband in such a tragic way. But I was thinking about it a year or two after the fact, and I thought, my body never left that gurney. What went to heaven and encountered the angels and the spiritual beings was my consciousness. which is where healing needed to happen and where healing did happen. So then I go back to my body and the thing is gone. And I knew immediately it was gone. So with this arm problem, I thought, I know this. I know that healing happens in consciousness. And then the body moves things around and shifts things around. There's a book by Larry Dossey called Love. No, that's not it. Oh my goodness. All of Larry Dossey's books are wonderful. One is prayers and healing or something like that. Healing prayers. I don't remember. But he has story after story after story after story of people who have dramatic healings just through prayer. And so I really believe the frontier of healing for the 21st century is going to be the spiritual based healing. There's just so many stories. You know, I lived in an area with a very strong church presence when all this happened. And I shared my story with a woman who was very connected to one of the largest churches in the country. And she was on the call center. So people would call in and ask for prayer. And she would stop and pray for them and give the number to the people who prayed all the time. But when I told her this story, she said, Rosemary, I'm not surprised. And I said, well, Cindy, I appreciate that because lots of folks are. And she said, at this call center, she said, we have so many people healed of things that doctors say are incurable. She said, but we tend to lean on God last instead of first, or even somewhere in the middle. And everybody's different. And I mean, when my arm, this thing happened, it was very painful and very unpleasant. And I thought to myself, I would like to not be involved in medical care. But then I thought, ow, I better at least go get it set. Because when I looked at it, I took a time. I was on my way to a bike ride. So much for good health, right? I take a bike ride every other morning, and I'm on a bike path in my new house, which makes me very happy. And I was walking out the door, and I tripped, and I went kaboom. So I'm laying on the floor, and it's a quite difficult experience actually. And I thought, well, maybe it isn't broken. And I looked at my arm, and I go, oh boy, that's broken. But yeah, I do believe that spiritual healing will be the next frontier in medicine. But again, I couldn't do it myself on this one. So I'm saying there is a place in our life now for doctors and painkillers and all the et ceteras. And I do believe very strongly that we all have to choose our own path. But it was remarkable coming back from this and not only knowing that my physical illness was healed, but that I'd had a reset of my soul. I really had. That
Yeah.
angst I had felt over my husband's passing was gone, and it stayed gone. There are a lot of times I cry because I miss him. I really did love him. After I got past the bitterness and the anger and the grief and the self-recrimination and all the rest of the ugly stuff that swirls around this kind of thing, I realized I did love him. How he felt toward me was actually not as big an issue. I had to accept that as what the angels told me is I loved. Anytime we love, we're going to be okay. Things are going to work out. And I had been saying I loved him so much, how could he do this? The angels said, just say I loved.
Mm.
And that brought me so much peace. And I think it's Deuteronomy 2:3, ye have circled the mountain long enough, time to stop and go north. And I had been in the other phrase I heard is another great one. You'll never find answers on the merry-go-round, which I
Oh,
guess is kind of another version of Deuteronomy 2:3.
oh, that
But yeah,
is
I'd been on
so
the
funny.
merry-go-round.
Yeah.
I loved him so much. How could he do this? I loved him so much. How could he do this to me? I thought he loved me. He didn't love me. How could he? I mean, just constant, constant,
Mm.
constant ruminations. So the angels helped me get out of that. And the healing was permanent. I mean, all of it, the grief, and I still cry. It's so funny. I get emails from people and they want me to, they feel like if they can come visit me and touch me, almost like lords, visiting lords, they'll
Mm.
be healed. And I wish
Yeah.
they could see me. I go to the dentist every other week and my arm's been in a
Oh
cast for
gosh.
a long time. I mean, I'm not the ascended master. I'm really not.
Yeah, I so appreciate that you are sharing about this because this is really, I was so curious about this because I know, and we've talked about how the cancer was healed, it wasn't there. But then, yeah, how to go on after that? I just think it's such a huge enormous topic because, what do you believe now about illness and suffering? What are those really about, do you think?
I have heard people say, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had a great quote. She would talk about people who were saying, "Oh, there is no pain. It's only a mental impression. There is no pain once you understand this." And they would do the and really get deep into it. And she said those people she'd walk up to or she wanted to and stick them in the butt with a sewing needle, and just watch them jump. I think that it's too easy when you're in good health. I've heard it called the snobbery of good health. When you're in good health, to say, you could pray your way through this, or you could do this, or you could do that. When you're hurting, uh, it's hard to overcome that. And when I was hurting a bunch through this experience, I've learned a lot about the human body. It is kind of fascinating. When you break a bone, so many amazing little things happen. I mean, they send the little white blood cells to help infection, and they send red blood cells, and they send all kinds of things, and that's what the swelling is. And they actually there's all fancy names for these things, but they send little workers in there to kind of clean up the mess, and then they send new little workers in there to patch things up and start building that bone back. I mean, it's just amazing. And so the people who say there's no creator, I'm like, oh, give me a break. There's no way this body could be so self-healing on its own. But I believe in my whole heart with spiritual healing. And I think we got a couple things going on. I think this society is very hard to live in. I mean, you got to go to the DMV and you got to pay all these taxes, and food's so expensive, and housing is scarce, and affordable housing is impossible to find. And my my dog has since passed, but she needed something done. And they said, well, we're going to send you to a dog radiologist. And I'm like, when did this happen? They're specialists in veterinary medicine. But yes, I think life is very hard, and I think it gets to our psyche, and I think sometimes that turns into a disease process. But then you look at a baby that's 6 months or 12 months old that has a disease, and you're like, well, that's not the baby thinking bad thoughts. And I think a lot of this new age stuff is very, very disturbing victim blaming. I do. I think
Mm.
that's unfair. So I think sometimes crap just happens, and I think sometimes our thoughts let stuff in. I think sometimes we have to just watch our thoughts and be careful. Norman Vincent Peale said, gosh, stand guard at the door of your thoughts and watch. And then a woman named Mary Baker Eddy, who founded a church when women weren't even hardly allowed to talk in the church, but she said, stand porter at the door of thought. So I think that's important. People, people my age tend to get into talking about medical stuff. And I think that's a tragic mistake. Well, the thing they took out of me was this big. I'm like,
Yes.
no, why are we talking about this?
Yes.
Whatever you magnify gets bigger. I mean, it sounds trite, but it's true. So,
Hmm.
yeah. And as to my own case, I I do get nervous when people seem to think that I'm some spiritual guru. I am not. I still have all the struggles one has in life. And I was dating, gosh, when I first moved to the Midwest area, I started dating. I dated a man who had been neck deep in the medical profession, and he had background in oncology. And I was still in my tell everybody your happy news phase. And I told this guy what had happened. He said, well, it's going to come back. It always comes back. I hope you can check it all the time because it always comes back. It always comes back. Always. And
Wow.
I was actually really scared. I blocked his number. I'm like, okay, we're done.
Yeah.
But I was also pretty scared. And then I asked God for a sign that I didn't need to be frightened because I got so just churned up about it. And the first message I got was, okay, Rosemary, you didn't have traditional medical treatment. I mean, I had no treatment for this thing. And God said, divine healing is different from medical healing. It's gone, not coming back. We took care of this. God's healing is forever. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's true. But I would still get nervous sometimes. I was passing this car wash. I literally asked God for a sign. And I was passing this car wash, and it was three words were flashing up. It was clean, shine, protect. And that's what happened to me. I
Yeah.
got cleaned up, I got shined up, and now I'm protected. And that brought
Wow.
me so
Yeah.
much peace. And interestingly, I had something happen to my back. I can't even remember now. Doesn't matter. But they did a full body MRI to figure out what's going on. And the full body MRI came out perfect. I mean, I'm perfectly healthy. And that was just, I thought that was just a nice little bonus of saying, yes, nothing to worry about. You're okay. But I guess if I could tell everybody one thing, they have this idea that I have just achieved bodhisattva status. You're not.
Yeah. I just love how you talk about this, and I could see where people might think that about you, and I totally get that, but I find it so remarkable that you believe the next frontier in healing is spiritual healing. I couldn't agree more. And I've often just pondered and wondered because we do hear about people who have had these experiences similar to yours and they come back and they're all healed. And my thought is, how can we access that here, now? You're talking about that with your arm, right? Uh,
Yeah.
bring that back through. Do you ever, when you
That
met
has
it,
been very frustrating, by the way.
right? It's like send it down. But do you ever meditate or pray or do any kind of practice to find your way back to that place?
I do. I do that a lot. I do a variety of things. One of the things I do sometimes is I just lie in the dark and I think about being in that black void when I was floating away from my body. That was a place of perfect peace, and I try to return to that. And when I occasionally pray for others, I mean, they specifically say, "I'm having a problem, please pray for me." And I've had pretty good results when I go to the white room with them. And in that white room, and I talk about this in my book and in our prior podcast, there was this white mist, and I tried to focus on an individual droplet, and I could not. And I was told, well, these aren't water droplets. These are particles of light. And you're being cleansed from the muck of the earth. And that was the word they used, the muck of the earth, for being prepared to go to heaven. As a friend said, leave your muddy boots at the door. So when I'm praying for somebody who specifically said, I'm sick, it's emergent, I need your prayers, I visualize them in the white room with me. And I just give them a hug mentally. And we are in that white room. And I think about those particles of light, that maybe that's where we are all the time. And we just don't see it. Maybe the problem is our brain is filtering out all the beauty that is present. People talk about vibrational frequencies, and I get a little nervous about that sometimes, but I do think we really have to be careful about the thoughts we have. And as to your question, I was born and raised a Christian Scientist, and we are taught from very early on, when you have a problem, pray about it. And my current romantic partner is having a lot of medical problems. So I have now been exposed to what the world looks like in a lot of medical care, and I'm not terribly impressed. It's it strikes me that maybe even 20 or 40 years from now, we'll look back at some of the things we did to the human body and say how absolutely archaic, how absolutely brutal, and say, well, we shouldn't have been doing that. That was a mistake.
Sort of like
So I
leeches.
do. Oh,
Sort
I
of
think
like
leeches will be
leeches.
considered kind. Yeah, kind compared to what
Hmm.
we do. My husband went through open heart surgery, and it was just unbelievable. It's like a
Mm.
science experiment. Let's see what we can do. Oh, we can
Oh.
saw the sternum in half. Oh,
Hmm.
we can take some grafts out of his arms and legs and stitch them in. And then we can lower his blood pressure to make sure these new things don't blow off. But oops, we got new problems by doing that. So let's get the blood pressure. Oops, we screwed up his heart. It's not beating right. So now he needs a pacemaker. I mean, I don't think I don't know. I'm not a fan of open heart surgery for people of a certain age because it really does feel like a science experiment. I don't know, and I'll probably get email about that.
Right. Well, they call it the practice of medicine, you know.
And the
They
art.
Oh yeah.
Not everyone
That
loves the same kind of art.
that's true.
I know, and
And not all
I don't mean to
artists.
disparage it, but
Yeah, I just was going to say not all artists are talented. either.
Yeah. The thing is, when we go see a physician, I can tell right away if they have a compassionate heart or even a heart open to the things that aren't medical. There's a book by Bernie Siegel, Love, Medicine, and Miracles. And I might have mentioned it before, but I love that book because he was an oncologist and he noticed that, he'd send patients home and say, you have 3 months or 6 months or whatever. And he said a lot of his patients just go home and die on schedule. But he said that every now and then he'd run into one of his patients who'd been given 6 months to live, and it's 4 years later, and they're, somewhere in Florida riding a wave somewhere or doing something. And so he actually started interviewing these people who had survived these ominous diagnoses. And he found the same story with all of them. They said, well, doc, when I found out I had 6 months to live, I quit my job. I bought a cabin or I bought a little cottage on the lake, or I divorced my wife. I married my girlfriend. I mean, they did the stuff they've always wanted to do, but couldn't give themselves permission. And then the diagnosis went away and then they were healed. And you asked earlier about healing. I think we're supposed to be living our lives that way. And I ask myself a lot, okay, Rosemary, if you found out that you were going to be gone from this earth in six months, what would you change about your life? And I think those are really good questions. And that was the premise of his book. We should start living our lives that way instead of saying, well, maybe one day, maybe in the future.
Yes. Well, that's the whole thing, with this what resonates. I really feel that our lives will be completely different if we allow ourselves to ask that question. You know, what would I really want to do? What resonates with me? What would feel good for me in my life to do, to follow? What changes? Because so many of the things that we do them because we did them yesterday and the day before and the day before that. And we just stay in
It's
these.
the way we've always done things.
Yes, and it's also expected, right? That will just continue from the other people in our lives or society or whatever. And I think if
Yeah.
we can explore what is resonating with us at the deepest level, what is really calling to us, wow, I just think there's so much potential. And so that's a little bit of what I'm hearing about his work in that book. Because when we follow that, that's truly living, I think.
I think that is very true. And I think we just have to tune into it more. We have got, I mean, you look at the Native Americans and the Aborigines and so many people that didn't have big big mortgage payments and big car payments and like I said, the DMV and the dentist and all this other stuff. I mean, one, they lived simpler lives and they died younger. But I do think there's a lot to be said for trying to simplify life. But I'm not sure how you do it in 21st century Western countries. I'm not. It's very difficult. I try to live a simple life, and man, it's challenging. It's very challenging. And one of the things you talked about was how do I live my life differently now? It has changed a bunch. But one of the things I do is I go to parks a lot. And there's one of the things I loved about riding my bike, which has been put off for a time until my arm heals. But I am in love with trees and watching crops grow. And when I was dating, I put on my dating profile that I love watching corn grow. And people would write me and say, ha ha ha, very funny. And I was like, oh, I guess everybody doesn't. I love trees. I just love them. And when I get really stressed, I have a window that looks out over a little grove of trees, and I just watch them sway back and forth in the wind. And I feel my breathing calm down, and I feel my brain calm down, and I feel me calm down. So I think there's a lot to be said for being grounded and for being surrounded by nature's beauty. And it's a reason I came to the Midwest. I do love the Midwest. For one, people seem more laid back here. They seem not so hurried and frenzied and frantic and frenetic. I lived on the East Coast and right on the East Coast, right near the ocean. And it's just a very different vibe. Did you know Edgar Casey built his hospital on Atlantic Avenue in Virginia Beach because he said I think it was the negative ions from the ocean were very healing. And I've been to his hospital many times. I mean, now it's just the Edgar Cayce Association for Research and Enlightenment. It's no longer a hospital. But you get on those upper floors and you've got an expansive view of the ocean. And so you're sheltered from the elements because the ocean sometimes, when that sand whips up and sandblasts you in the face, it's not a bunch of fun. But I can see how calming and healing that is. So I think
Yes.
everything about nature can restore our soul.
Yes, I totally agree with you, Rosemary. And I've often said similar things. There's a rhythm, and there's a nature to me is like an orchestra playing, and it's
Hmm.
just always in tune with itself. And I
Boy,
think
that's
if,
beautiful.
oh, thanks, because I feel like if we allow ourselves to listen to it with our bodies, with our minds, um, then we can entrain to that vibration, that feeling, that intelligence of nature. And I do think it's very healing for sure. When you came back, I remember you talking about you went to a church and an angel
Yes.
came and to you. And if you don't mind, could you refresh our memory on that story? And then, because where I want to go with that is, do you regularly still talk to the angels? What are you sensing since your NDE?
I am so frustrated that I don't hear the angels like I did. I do still get messages and I hear little things, and that's comforting and that's wonderful. And I called my friend Ellen Dye, who's also had a profound NDE, and I said, I'm not hearing the angels like I used to do. What am I doing wrong? And she said, You're not doing anything wrong. It fades. It fades, that connection, because she said, We have to be living here on earth. And if all you want to do is lie in a bed and listen to the angels, or sit on a bench at a park and listen to the angels, you're really not doing your part to be a blessing to this world. I guess that makes sense. But I do try to tune in. I do try to be still. I do try to listen. But yeah, the angels in the church, that was profound. You were talking about living our lives more simplistically and doing the things we're here to do. When I wrote that book, Remembering the Light, it took me 3 years to write. I wrote a manuscript and I thought, this is still bitter, still kind of angry at how things happened, things my husband did, things his friends did, things that happened, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I tore it up, threw it away, did that again. Third time, I thought, well, there's a few pages here worth salvaging. And what I'm saying, it took me 3 years to write that book. And every time I thought, I don't want to do this. And now one of the things you see at Amazon or on the comments on the different videos I've done is, well, she's just in it for the money. She's making it up. I'm like, okay, that's somebody who never wrote a book in their life. Secondly, that's somebody who never tried to live off the income from a book in their life. If I was trying to live off that income, the income from a book, I'd be living in a pup tent at a national park and, going around with my tin cup asking for change. Writing is not a path to wealth unless, well, other factors, but yeah, I was sitting in that church, a little white wooden church that's 150 years old, which is one of the reasons I love that little church. And it's in a tiny village in the Midwest. I'm just sitting in the pew, and I had been having a profound physical problem of when I ate, I got sick to my tummy, and food was not moving through my body as it should. It seemed like there was a blockage somewhere. And I got pretty sick pretty fast. So I went to that church just to say, God help me. I've prayed my best prayers. And this was about 9 months after the surgery. So I suspected it might have been scar tissue, or who knows, it doesn't matter. But I'm sitting in that church and I said, God, please help me. If this isn't better by Monday, I'm going to have to seek emergent medical care. And I knew the solution is they cut you open and fix the scar tissue, and then you get more scar tissue. So I was sitting in that pew praying, and they have this beautiful ritual in so many churches called bringing in the light, where an acolyte or somebody walks in holding a candle on a great big brass stick, and they take it to the front and they light the candles at the altar. It was absolutely a beautiful ceremony. I love it. Called bringing in the light. Well, I see the couple young people bringing the light, and it's, I'm thinking, oh, that's so lovely. Well, behind them is an angel. And I look up and I'm like, whoa. And I kept looking forward because I'm looking at nothing, according to the rest of the congregation, I'm sure. But he was dressed in the garb of a protecting angel, like you'd see from 2,000 years ago, with the helmet and the funny little ear flaps. I should probably find out what they're called. And the cute skirt and the big sword. And by skirt, I mean it has the leather things hanging from it, the strips. I need to look up the specific language. But he stops. He stops at the end of the pew, and I'm sitting on the end of the pew, and I look up at him, and I know this is going to be a telepathic conversation. And I just kind of looking like, and then, you always look around like, anyone else seeing this? But he says very definitively, and this was not your God is love angel. This was, what is wrong with you? And the angel said, stop worrying about your pride, your stomach, and there's something else. And he said, and get that book written. And there was no fooling around. It was like your mother's angry voice. And I was like, what do you say to that? And then he was gone. And the thing when he said, oh, I remember, no, there was another element to it. A Bible verse came to mind after he finished talking. And it was, surely the Lord was in this place and I knew it not. And the way that that was kind of relayed to me was in my stomach, where I was having so much pain and so much trouble, that God was there. And where God is present, how can you not have perfect harmony and not have things moving as they should move and working as they should work? And instantly I felt a little pop internally, and all that nausea and all that pain simply evaporated. And I was like, wow, it's over. I don't have to go to a doctor. I'm healed. And I knew I was healed. And I just felt so profoundly changed. Like the angels are still with me, and they pop in every now and then to chat, I guess, is the way this works. And afterwards, it was my first visit into that church. I was new to the Midwest. It was the first time I'd ever been to that little white clapboard church. And the minister came up to introduce me, and I'm still sitting in the pew because I'm literally just kind of trying to figure out, wow, that was really profound. And he introduces himself to me and he says, you're glowing. And I said, I know. He said, no, you're glowing. And I said, I know. And then there was, the name introductions and everything else. But I went home, and I remember this so clearly. I went home and I had 2 ham and cheese sandwiches immediately because I had been not able to eat. And then I went out to lunch with a friend immediately. We had a pre-planned lunch date, and I ate with her too. But that was profound. That
Yeah.
was quite a thing.
Do you feel as though you're doing okay if the angels aren't showing up, and that if things get to a certain point and do you really do need the help, all will happen as it's supposed to happen?
Well, as mentioned, I get a lot of email, and I read them all. And if somebody asks for prayer, I pray for them. I'm sadly not able to respond to them all because I get sometimes 10 to 20 a day. And God bless them. I mean that. I do pray for everybody. Uh, I guess I am okay with it because one of the things that happens through all these emails is I learn a lot of new prayers. But one of my favorites came from a woman who says when things are going badly and she needs help, she stops and says, okay, God, I don't know who's on duty right now, but I need some angels and I need them right now. And I have never asked that prayer without having some sort of response. And there's a friend in my life. He's a realtor friend. And he's not a close friend, but his name is David. 3 times I've prayed that prayer when I'm crying or things are going wrong or messes are happening in life. You get overwhelmed. I get overwhelmed. 3 different times I said, God, I need help. I'm floundering. Please help me. And I don't know who's on duty, but come on, need some help here on this hard life earth thing. That guy David will call me out of the blue when I haven't heard from him in a month or 3. My phone will ring and it's David. I go, hi, David. He goes, you doing okay?
Wow,
So
maybe
yes,
maybe he's an angel on earth and doesn't even know it.
he might be because it's so funny. While he believes in spiritual things, He's not what the world would ever call a spiritual person. And he had an open house at this very tall condo overlooking the Mississippi River. And it was a beautiful view. Because I went to his open house, beautiful view. And he said, yes, I take a glass of sparkling water and I will go sit on that balcony and I will just think about the beauty in the river and the beauty of the trees and nature's beauty all around me. And I said, oh, David, do you really? He said, no, I sit there and drink a brandy and smoke a cigar. Are you crazy?
Oh, I love it. I just love it.
So, yes, I do miss the angels, and I wish they were more present, and I don't know how to make them so. But I do think my friend Ellen was right. We're supposed to be living here, and like I was talking about, writing that book was very hard for me. It was very, very hard, and putting something so incredibly personal out in the world was extremely difficult. I mean, I bare my soul in that book, and I've gotten my share of criticism from lots of folks. But I feel like that was the thing that was put on my heart to do, and I believe from the emails I received, it has been a help to others. And I do get a lot of emails from people who just say thank you for writing the book. So it was a very hard thing for me to do. But people say, why did you come back? Why did you come back? Heck if I know. I guess to keep the dentist in business? I don't know.
Oh, Rosemary. But so at the beginning of chapter 1, you have that quote though. And the quote is, as soon as healing takes place, go out and heal someone else, by Maya
Yes.
Angelou. And so, what does that mean to you? Uh, where you are now, everything you've experienced, and, how you're serving.
Oh, that's another great question. How I'm serving. I consider that book and these podcasts my quiet ministry. Before we started this, I was asked, how much time do you have? And I always go to the shy side. I get so nervous before these podcasts. I don't know why, but I get so insanely nervous. I don't want to mess something up or say the wrong thing or say it the wrong way. Uh, I think of this as my quiet ministry. The podcast, the book, the emails, the praying for folks. And even when I'm on my bike, if I see somebody who looks like they're not having their best day, I try to take a moment and ask the angels to watch over them and help them remember how loved they are. When I was at the depths of my despair after my husband's tragic end, a friend had shared a quote with me that she had lost a sister the same way. Her sister had ended her own life, as did my husband. But she had found a quote, or it might have come to her, I don't remember, but it said, help me heal so I can help others heal. And so I wrote that on a piece of paper and I taped it literally to every wall in my home. And I don't mean every room, I mean every wall. So when I felt like I was sinking beneath the waves, I could see, God, please help me heal so I can help others heal. And I know there have been circumstances where I've been with somebody who's been through a trauma. And I don't shrink back. And I would have before. But once you've been through a trauma, you know how to comfort somebody. And sometimes that comfort is just putting your arm around their shoulder and saying, God, this is so well, what I say is this sucks so bad, doesn't it? It's going to get better, but man, I know how bad this hurts. And sometimes they'll say, well, do you really understand? I say, well, let me give you the short version. And they go, oh, yeah, yeah. So I guess I call that my own little quiet ministry. And the other thing that gives me immeasurable peace, I talk about in our prior podcast that as I was floating away from my body in that heavenly experience, I said, you're dying. And then I realized actually proper tense is you're not dying, you're dead. And I thought, well, that's pretty funny that I correct my tense when I'm going on to my reward. That's what comes from being a writer, I guess. And I laughed out loud because I thought I cracked myself up, which I am pretty good at that. And so many parents have written me and said, I've lost a child. But when I heard that their funny little laugh went with them and that I will hear that little laugh again one day, they say that gives me so much peace that your funny little laugh made the transition. Because that is one of the things I say is I realized in the experience that everything I really am, my natural curiosity, my desire to know, oh man, what's going on? What's happening here? My funny little laugh, my macabre sense of humor, that it all went with me, and as did so many memories. So I am so grateful that maybe the people of this world who have had to bury a child can find some solace in knowing everything that child really was is still present, is still there. That hasn't changed. It hasn't gone away.
Mm. Do you think you have another book to write?
Nope. But I do go to that little white clapboard church about once a month, just in case there's going to be another drop in. You know,
Oh, that is
I'm
so
like,
funny. So
anyone
funny.
here? I mean,
Any
I guess if I felt,
directives?
yeah, I guess if I was told to do something, but I just thought it was so funny. I mean, that was his message. Stop thinking so much about your pride and your stomach. And it might have been your money because I knew writing a book was going to be expensive. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
there's a third element, but yeah, I thought that was so telling that the angel didn't say some lofty messages. Stop worrying so much about your stomach and your pride. I mean, those are very earthly things. And my pride was putting this story out there and having the whole world know the soft underbelly of poor Rosemary. I really didn't want that, but I thought, oh no, help me heal so I can help others heal. Ah,
It's a big ask. It's a big
it
ask.
is a big ask.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you've just done all of it so splendidly. What do you hope that readers would take from the book? What's your top thing that you hope that they'll get?
Well, in the acknowledgments, I put SDG. So let me get this right. Soli Deo Gloria, which means to God alone all glory, which is what Bach and somebody else, the famous composers, put in their compositions. I want the book to glorify God because in the beginning when you write a book, you gotta know your audience. For whom am I writing this? Am I writing it for people in trauma or people comforting people in trauma or the general public or people who are Christian or people who aren't Christian? I mean, for who is your audience? And I thought, well, God, I'm writing it to glorify God. So my number one hope from that book is that it will provide comfort, just comfort and succor and solace. Because I could tell you the top 5 emails I get, but one of them is about the children and the laughter, that their laughter goes with them. The other one is that when the angels were by my hospital bed singing to me, after I had returned from my heavenly experience, they said, we know that life on earth is hard. And people take great solace in knowing that the spiritual beings that are around us and helping us through this, they know this is hard. In fact, when I got to heaven and I'm floating in that blackness, one of the first things that was said to me was, well, here you are. Welcome home. That was a hard one, but look at you. You did it, and you did it well. And I've told so many people if I could summarize a whole experience in 3 words, it would be welcome home, dearie.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So I want people to know that the angels, I do believe we're surrounded by spiritual beings. There was a woman, Sarah Bon Brethnock, I think was her name. She wrote some inspirational books in the 90s, but she said, be willing to believe that a companion spirit is with you every step of the way and knows the next step. I think we have to call on them. What I've read is they can't come in unless they're invited. There's rules. There are spiritual rules. People don't know that. Like if you feel a dark, demonic entity in your home, you have to be the owner of the home to cast it out, which I think that's so cool. And by owner, you can be the one on the lease. But yeah, there are rules in the spiritual world, but the angels have to be invited in. And I think we forget to do that. And I try to do it multiple times a day and say, hey, companion spirit, let's chat or help me through this. And I
Yes.
found myself in a very difficult circumstance where I had said something very stupid. And people think, oh, you're so articulate and you're so smart. I am the queen of doing stupid things sometimes. And I had to go back to a friend's house and say, I did something really stupid and I said something I shouldn't have said, and I need you to give me a do over. And I literally asked God and the angels to help me. And another prayer somebody sent me was, God, please limit the consequences of my folly.
I
I use
really
that
like
one a
that.
lot.
Yes. That's great.
So yeah, I guess my number one takeaway from the book would just be to provide comfort to people because our life on this earth is hard. Do you remember Daniel Brinkley? He wrote about his NDE. He got struck by lightning. He was from South Carolina because I love the Southern accent.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, he was one of the first ones, I mean, to write a book. And he wrote a book, oh, golly, I can't remember. I forgot the title, but he and Raymond Moody became close friends because Raymond Moody was writing Life After Life. And I had been fascinated by those books and read all of them. Betty Eadie, George Ritchie, Daniel Brinkley, and of course the little paperback that Raymond Moody put out. But Daniel Brinkley was told in heaven, we are all heroes just for being here. Like, this
Yes.
is no carnival ride.
Yes.
This is hard. And I hear people say, oh my gosh, this makes me angry when people say, oh, this earthly experience is just a dream from which we'll awaken. And I felt that when I died, I felt like I was waking up from a really intense dream. But I get so angry when people say that to somebody who hasn't really had trauma. You get back to me if you suffer real trauma, like my friend who had to bury her 14-year-old only child. Don't be talking to people and saying this is all just a dream. Yeah, I guess it probably is, but it's hard. And when hard things happen, it's hard to recover from. And my husband ended his life in 2016, so we're 9.5 years now. And there are still days I sit down and sob. I wish he hadn't done it. I still miss him. And I've encountered more than a few people that years after the devastating suicide of a loved one, they kind of slip away and they need some specific psychiatric help. And I guess I'm just saying that when you go through a real trauma like that, not real, but a severe trauma, it can take some time to find your way back.
Indeed. There. Yes. I wanted to ask you one thing before we have to say goodbye, and that is, I love talking to you, um, but we don't get into politics or anything here on the show, but there's a lot of chaos and a lot of just stuff happening in the world, and I'm wondering how you navigate these times that we're going through that are, they're kind of different for us. But do you have any suggestions about how a sensitive person uh, can
Mm.
navigate right now?
I actually talked with my friend Ellen about this too, because it seems like so many people and communities and states and countries are in chaos, just in chaos. And good things don't come from being in chaos, whether it's on a personal level or a larger level. I before my husband's death, I was a news junkie. And boy, I tell you what, when I came back from heaven, that went away. I read the headlines, but I don't read the articles. And I don't spend too much time even on the headlines. I I don't know really how to answer that. As you just said, I don't talk about politics with anyone because it looks to me like it's just another polarization. It's this race or that race, this party or that party, rich and poor. There's just so much polarization. We're always trying to break God's creation into two when there isn't two, there's just one. And it's so easy to get kind of drawn into that stuff. And I remind myself there's one God. I mean, that was the Hebrew Decalogue and that was the first commandment. And, thou shalt have no other gods before me. There's one God. And when we get into this constant polarization, it's a dirty trick. It really is. And it gets people to be destructive and it gets people to be angry and it gets people to be enraged. And the thing that I figured out about politics, and this seems so simplistic, but I'm not going to run for a political office, and I'm not going to change the mind of any politician in power. So I try desperately to just be the one who sits quietly and prays that peace is our natural state. And it's so easy to forget that. But when we get into this black and white and good and bad and rich and poor and all the other things that would divide us, we're getting away from that one God. And it's just, I really believe politics are a dirty trick. Because what are any of us going to do about it? And I mean, I'm not diminishing those who decide to go out and do protests. I'm not. That's their thing, and it's just not my thing. But I just think we have to find a way to just be kinder to each other. And we have to have laws, and we have to deal with people who aren't following laws. Uh, I was at a restaurant yesterday. I went to the big city. I don't like the big city, but I went to the big city yesterday and I was at this restaurant. I was looking around. I was like, okay, I don't feel good in this restaurant. Well, this young fellow ran in screaming some crazy stuff. And I was so taken aback. I mean, and so were the rest of the patrons. We were like, okay, this guy is so far from right in the head. And they called the police and they called the rescue squad and they came and they helped him out and they calmed him down. I was very grateful that there was somebody that could be called that would help this young man get help. But yeah, I just try very hard to think that we are not split in two. We all are. We are all created by the same God. And I honestly don't like politics because it just turns, I mean, look what happened with the current election and the elections prior to that. There were stories of people who stopped, family members who stopped speaking to each other because you voted for X. Well, that shouldn't be happening. How about if we just put a sign on every door that says, when you enter into my home, we don't talk politics here? So
Right.
I don't know. That's kind of a namby-pamby answer, but
Well, but I think sometimes that's helpful, you know, because to get all embroiled in it doesn't help either. And so I don't know. I think we're all just trying to figure it out right now. And sometimes, you know, we just have to do what we can um, and see
I
where it
think anger
goes.
is easy. Yeah, I
Yes.
agree. And we all have to find our own path. One of the biggest lessons I learned, and I just shared this with a friend who's going through a divorce, but I think one of the biggest lessons I learned from my husband's death was work out your own salvation. So in other words, as young people say, stay in your own lane.
Mm-hmm.
Their spiritual progress on this earth is not my business. I am very busy taking care of my own spiritual growth and trying to do my own thing. It's so easy to say, well, look at them. Look what they're doing. Why aren't they like me? As Harry Chapin used to say, why isn't everyone on the earth as good as me? I mean, he would say that in jest.
Yes, of course, of course. I think that's a wonderful message. You know, we just need to stay in our own lanes because we do have our own business to take care of. And if everybody, or let's just say if more people did that, we would have less conflict in the world. Rosemary, as I said a moment ago, I just love talking to you. You're
Oh, thank
you're
you.
so fun, and for somebody who gets anxious before these things, I mean, I'd never know. I'd never know. So thank you for
Oh,
saying
man,
yes
I
and coming
was.
back.
You're very welcome.
Uh, to hear more about Rosemary, you can tune in to that episode, season 4, episode 26, when the show was called Beyond the Reiki Gateway. And that title is Into Death and Back Again. So that'll take you all through the details of Rosemary's story. And you can visit her website, temporarydeath.com, and find out more about her, order her book, and I just want to say one last time, Rosemary, thank you so much for sharing more about who you are.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. Keep trusting your truth, keep listening to your inner wisdom, and keep following what resonates. To sign up for the newsletter, leave a review, or connect, visit whatresonatеspodcast.com. You'll also find everything linked in the show notes.